In 2016, Chinese man named Qingpei was accused of a mass murder in his remote village in the Yunnan province. Locals reported that Qingpei was a gambler, and they speculated that he had racked up debts. He had returned to his small village to ask his parents for money, but instead the request turned fatal. Qingpei confessed to murdering both his parents with a pickaxe. After the initial killing, Qingpei decided that 2 was not enough. His logic being that, if just his parents were found, the police would quickly link the double homicide to the delinquent son. But if an entire neighborhood was killed, well, that would be attributed to the work of a madman, and Qingpei's parents would just have been caught up in the mix of it all. So he went on a murderous, manic rampage and killed 17 neighbors to cover his initial crime of killing 2. His victims included women, children, and anyone he feared might have overheard the argument with his parents that evening and could implicate him. The victims were members of 6 different families in 6 different households. The prosecuting attorney suggested that, in addition to casting suspicion onto a random serial killer perhaps, the gambling-addicted son thought he would receive his father's pension or other death benefits as an added bonus to what he thought was going to be a cover-up, so crazy that it just might work. Qingpei was eventually arrested in the capital, although the circumstances leading up to his arrest are unknown due to the cagey nature of the government officials, who may be fearful of more shame being brought upon the region by those who say this should have been prevented. The Xinhua news agency, operated by the Chinese government, did not state how the villagers were killed in their report, though the case is referred to as the Yama stabbings. Media sources not controlled by the government disclosed that both a knife, as well as some sort of sharp farming equipment, was used. Because the murder weapon used was not allowed weapons, such as a gun, Qingpei was able to move from household to household underneath the stealth of night with no resistance from the sleeping villagers. This alleged rampage killer was sentenced to death. In July of 2017, a court in Yunnan's Kuxing city said, quote, "The circumstances were especially vile, the means cruel, and the consequences extremely grave." Although he confessed to the facts of the crime, admitted guilt, and expressed remorse after being brought to justice, it was not sufficient for a lenient sentence. Indianapolis, Indiana, still reeling from the devastation of the pandemic, started their new year with a fresh horror, which shook the entire community. In the early hours of Sunday morning, on January 24, 2021, police were called at around 4 a.m. and otherwise quiet time for the neighborhood, which surrounded the 3300 block of East 36th Street. They responded to a report that someone had been shot. And when officers arrived on scene, they discovered a teenager on the floor of a front porch, bleeding from multiple gunshot wounds. Police would soon find out that the only surviving victim of this shooting was also related to the shooter. He was his little brother, and the victims are his entire family. The killer's girlfriend told police that the tragic night had begun when 17-year-old Raymond Childs was at her house, and says that without permission from his parents, Raymond had planned on spending the night there. Before he could make it to bed, though, Raymond's dad called his cell phone and ordered him to come home so as to not further upset the father. Raymond's girlfriend called him an Uber and told him to go home. The girlfriend said that she called the Uber and that Raymond went back to his house, but she doesn't remember the exact time. Then between approximately 2 a.m. and 3 a.m., and Raymond's girlfriend testified that he came back to her home unexpectedly and was now carrying 2 bags of clothes. Along with him, she recalls that he claimed His dad had kicked him out of the family home. Around 30 minutes after Raymond showed up at her house, his girlfriend received a startling message. On her phone, there had been a shooting on Adams Street, and she questioned Raymond as to whether the area that had reported the shooting was actually near the location of his family's home. She asked Raymond if he knew anything about the shooting, but he simply said he did not. Raymond's girlfriend insisted that they go to the spot on Adams Street which had reported the shooting, and now was crawling with police. It was in the early hours of sunlight by that point that the two walked up towards the crime scene. Raymond's girlfriend recalls that he was acting increasingly nervous to go back to the scene, and when he finally got there, he began crying, and as she put it, he, quote, acted like a clown. She recalls never seeing the side of him before and became suspicious and confused. The two then went back to the girlfriend's home until around 2 p.m. Little did she know that the massacre that Raymond had just walked away from was of his own doing. The only surviving victim was Raymond's little brother, who was merely 15 at the time. He told police that his older brother Raymond had, quote, gotten in trouble that night for leaving the house without permission. He recalls that upon Raymond's arrival back home, after his girlfriend had called him an Uber, that he told his brother that his father had told him he would be in deep trouble the next morning for what he had done, but morning would never come. For 6 of the home's occupants, the 15-year-old survivor, who testified after healing from 2 gunshot wounds, says that he was downstairs, hanging out with his parents and filling up a bottle of water from the kitchen when he distinctly heard 2 or 3 gunshots. From upstairs, his father yelled, "What was that?" But before he could react, he heard his little sister scream. He shot Elijah. Elijah was Raymond's older brother, and he was dating a girl who was 8 and 2 months pregnant and in the home at the time. Raymond then made his way downstairs and killed his parents in cold blood. The surviving brother, who initially found a hiding spot in the laundry room, said he heard a gun go off, and then he heard his father's last pleading words. He says that his father said, quote, "I'm sorry, Raymond. I love you," after he heard both of his parents killed. The 15-year-old ran outside, but Raymond was close on his trail. The 15-year-old recalls that, as he was being chased with a gun by his older brother, he called out, in a desperate attempt to save his own life, quote, "I can give you $40. Please don't kill me," but he recalls that Raymond just, quote, "looked at me and then shot me in the leg. I fell, he shot me in the arm. And then he tried to shoot me in the head, but missed, I guess." The teenager was able to get to a neighbor's home to call for help. Police found him on that neighbor's front porch. The victims were all family or close friends of the killer. These victims, killed in cold blood over curfew dispute, were all at varying points in their lives. Kissy Childs, 42, and Raymond Childs II, also 42, were the parents of 4, including the killer Raymond Childs III. Also killed were Elijah Childs, 18, his sister Rita Childs, 13. Both were siblings of the killer. Also murdered was Kiara Hawkins, 19, the girlfriend of Elijah Raymond's older brother. Kiara's nearly full-term unborn baby, who family were already calling baby Queso Childs, was due next week. Both the pregnant mother and the killer's older brother were killed with a single gunshot wound to the head. The baby did not survive. The killer's 13-year-old sister was found in a bedroom with a single gunshot wound to the chest. The parents of the killer had multiple wounds in their torso area. 9mm shell casings and spent 7.62mm cartridge casings were recovered at the scene. After the killer left his girlfriend's house, at around 2 p.m., the day of the shooting, he attempted to return the gun used to his cousin. The killer was found at a home on Wyatt Drive. In Indianapolis, police said it was a relative's home, but did not specify. Raymond was arrested without incident. Police then searched a white Chevy Impala, thought to be driven by the killer, and they found an AK-style magazine, wrapped in, clothes hidden in the front passenger sideboard. They also recovered a Draco firearm, which the killer had borrowed and returned to his cousin. 17-year-old Raymond Ronald Lee Childs III was charged with 6 counts of murder, which includes Hawkins' unborn child, and attempted murder for the near death of his little brother. He was also charged with carrying a handgun without a license under Indiana law. He will be tried as an adult.